Blanchland is an improbably beautiful village nestling in the Derwent Valley in the wild moorland of the North Pennines on Northumberland's border with County Durham. It's built almost entirely on the footprint of a pre-Monstratensian abbey founded in 1165 and dissolved by Henry VIII's agents in 1539. It was then rebuilt and remodelled in 1752 by the Lord Crewe's charity, owner of the estate since the death of Lord Crewe, Bishop of Durham, in 1721. Blanchland is the only village in the country to preserve the complete footprint of a medieval abbey. Lord Crewe's charity still own most of the village, which has a population of about 80 souls. The Grade 1 listed Abbey Church, however, feels like common ground, the community's own space. The nave was completely demolished at the dissolution, but the substantial chancel and north transept remain along with the north tower. It is the most complete example of a pre-Monstratensian abbey in Britain. Blanchland is one of 8 church buildings in this deeply rural, multi-parish benefice, which has been under the care of the same vicar since April 2015. The economy of Blanchland was based for years on a mix of lead mining and hill farming. Farming remains, but it's hard work and margins are tight. Diversification is essential. Tourism has become increasingly significant, boosted by the presence of the award-winning Lord Crewe Arms Hotel in the village, and also a thriving tea room in the former school. The inhabitants of the village are far from wealthy. All live in rented accommodation. Rising living and transport costs are making living here expensive, even to the point where some long-term residents feel that they have had no choice but to move into the former industrial towns in the west of County Durham. There's a very real danger that the village could slide into becoming a museum rather than retain its residential local community. Blanchland feels vulnerable. In 2018, the Blanchland Community Development Organisation, set up a decade or so earlier and funded by Lord Crewe's charity, together with the Parochial Church Council, successfully bid for a grant from the National Lottery Heritage Fund to begin the Blanchland Abbey project. This was essentially a mapping and capacity building exercise, completed in May 2020, and the images you're seeing are part of the lockdown era evaluation film. It proved to be hugely successful in involving almost half the village as volunteers, but even more so in engendering a strong sense of pride in the place of what more might be possible to achieve. Our aim is sustainable, heritage-led regeneration of the village, based on the resource of the Abbey. We felt we'd begun well. In the autumn of 2022, we succeeded in gaining a further funding from the National Lottery Heritage Fund of just under £100,000, with £20,000 from the Lord Crewe charity for the next stage of the project, the 6 A's of Blanchland, as subject today. These 6 A's are acoustics, archaeology, archives, artisans, audiences, and an abbey. Together, these will provide evidence, we hope, to make a case for major capital funding to improve the facilities of the abbey, to benefit both the local and wider community, and provide a sustainable future for the village community. We designed the 6 A's project so that the research, archaeology, archives and acoustics both informs our artisans response and develops our audiences. This so we can trial people's ideas and gather evidence for regenerating the village in a way that is rooted in the abbey which underlies it. So let's begin with archaeology. During the earlier project phase, Durham University Archaeology Department surveyed the transept and choir and parts of the churchyard with ground-penetrating radar. This was to assess if there were any archaeological anomalies which might influence our plans to install heating and improve access into the building. The then Diocesan Archaeological Advisor had suggested in 2017 that there might be medieval underfloor acoustic chambers, which are known from other abbeys like Whalley Abbey in Lancashire. Blanchland Abbey has a fine acoustic, and better understanding of what causes this, especially if it was an authentic medieval acoustic, could bolster its distinctiveness as a performance space and recording venue. Earlier this year, 3 small trenches were opened in the Abbey and 1 in the churchyard. All the excavating was done by volunteers under professional supervision, and they were hugely enthusiastic, you can see, despite the February chill. We arranged visits for 2 local primary schools and 1 for teenagers excluded from schools. Local volunteers also became guides, explaining the work to the many visitors who dropped in to see what we were finding. Showing the archaeology to these wide-ranging audiences and seeing how much the experience meant to visitors has helped villagers develop their pride and sense of place, shifting their familiar everyday into something more rarefied, a detailed curiosity that is valued more deeply by new audiences. Archaeology almost always brings surprises. We found no evidence of acoustic chambers, but uncovered a complex network of culverts built after the dissolution but before the mid-18th century restoration. Their purpose remains unclear, and we found few artefacts to provide accurate dating evidence, but the scale and size of them seems to indicate an industrial use. This is our own dark age. We now need the archival volunteers to decipher what was happening here between the dissolution in 1539 and the restoration of the building in 1752. Just before the archaeology started, we received photogrammetry training from the Belief in the Northeast project through Dr. David Petts and his colleagues also of Durham University Archaeological Department. They taught us how to use our smartphones to make 3D models of the graffiti carved around the village, which could then be analysed in their lab. Volunteers used the Kiri Engine phone app, but the researchers had high-definition imaging tools and recorded the graffiti scrawled onto the timberwork inside the abbey. These timbers were installed in the 1880s, and hidden behind a curtain, the organ case is covered in people's signatures and drawings. Here is a 3D model of the organ case, made by Durham University. You can see this is a proper palimpsest, with names overwritten on each other in pencil, in different inks and in scratch marks. Professor Marta Diaz-Guardamino is running the images through a spectral analysis so that we can decipher the different names and places these graffiti artists visited us from. The earliest dates we've found by eye is 1919, and we're keen to make contact with the graffitiists or their descendants to invite them to take part in the activities we have planned later in the project. Through our archivist volunteers, we already know there were charabanc trips from the industrial towns in County Durham, and here we see trips from coal mining areas like Hordern and Chesterley Street, both in County Durham. Clearly, people who feel moved to make their mark on our abbey do not fall into the stereotype of restrained, older, middle-class day trippers. The truth is more lively and far more egalitarian. We're very welcome precedent for the diverse audiences we want to encourage to come to Blanchland. Professor Marta was so impressed with the built heritage here, she brought her undergraduate students on a field visit to record the medieval grave slabs on the abbey floor and the carvings in the houses around the village square. This turned out to be a lively melding of expertise, the students' technical skills and the locals' knowledge of the minutiae of the place. We know the acoustics of the building are remarkably good today, but the archaeology says our original theory is wrong. They aren't enhanced by medieval acoustic chambers. Indeed, we've recently found in the archives an 18th century vicar minuting that the echo is so great that by my father's direction, a sailcloth partition was drawn across the wing, which helps to deaden the sound. So, 250 years ago, the acoustics were so bad they were rigging contraptions to alter it. And now it has musicians volunteering to play here. Clearly, these acoustics need further investigation. Dr. Gianluca Foschi of Newcastle University's Centre for Landscape has created this point cloud model of the Abbey building and is in the process of mapping acoustic data onto it. The full results of this are still in preparation, but it seems that the fine carved wooden ceiling added to the chancel and choir in the late 19th century is likely the cause of the acoustic improvement. We hope to manipulate the acoustic data to plan how to best remodel the building as a performance venue. The villagers are now volunteering to explore the archives to try to flesh out how the abbey and village developed, particularly during our Dark Age. We need to provide a richer context to the acoustic and archaeological investigations. One aspect will be to shed new light on the craft industries that thrived in the village during and since the monastic period. This will give us an indication of how the medieval community sustained themselves here, pre-lead mining, and perhaps stimulate ideas for new businesses rooted in the assets of the area. Not only will this give a depth of authenticity to new visitor experiences and products that local businesses are trialling, like artisan markets and craft products, but it might also help address the difficulty of living in a rural place like this. We're hoping to cooperate with the Lord Crew charity to build demand for live-work tenancies, converting underused buildings into workshop spaces, and making it viable for more families to live and work here in the village. Throughout the 2 stages of the project, not only have digital technologies helped to create a more robust and possible authentic plan for rural resilience, but they have helped to encourage a wide and enthusiastic participation by local volunteers and begun to open Blanchland's unique and very special heritage to a far wider audience. Thanks to the players of the National Lottery who made this possible. Find out more about the 6 As of Blanchland and how to visit Blanchland Village at blanchland.org.